The Bruins fire their coach. Ovi's goal race comes to a halt. And what in the world is going on with Auston Matthews? We'll get into all of that and more on today's Eastern Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Wednesday to Locked On NHL listeners. It is the Eastern Conference Wednesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast with myself, Mike DiStefano. No Ross Levitan today. Big news for Rossi. His wife has gone into labor today, so he is a little preoccupied, I would say, with that. So pinch hitting is Nick Zararis, who you guys know well. What's going on, Nick? Appreciate you hopping on last minute.
Hey, man, this is what life is for. You got to have pinch hitters. Every now and then stuff happens. Life happens.
Life happens. But from the Locked On fam, we do want to congratulate Ross and Rachel. And yes, it's true. Ross married a Rachel. That is very, very true. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Man, things are really starting to pick up in the NHL, isn't it, Nick? It seems like there's a lot to get into today. Let's start with one of the bigger newsy items over the last 24 hours. The Boston Bruins, the big bad Bruins, the team that 2 years ago had the greatest regular season in NHL history, has fired their head coach, Jim Montgomery, out, and Joe Sacco in as the interim head coach. What did you make of the firing? Were you surprised that they elected to part ways so quickly with Monty after, a couple of years of great success?
It's one of those things, hockey season doesn't really start till we get that first in-season firing. Last year, it was Shea Woodcroft and Chris Knobloch slid in and the Oilers went on a great run. But we all know the deal here. Their franchise goalie didn't have a training camp, didn't have a preseason. His save percentage is 10% below league average right now. Their kill and their power play are both well below league average. Those will swing back. The Bruins have enough talent on their roster where I don't think they're dead. I don't think they're a bottom 5, bottom 10 team. I think they're probably pretty close to the middle. I think they're in the same tier as, say, the Islanders would be if the Islanders were fully healthy. But it's everything that could go wrong for them did go wrong for them to come out of the gate.
Yeah, and I mean, they lost 4 of the last 5 games and have fallen out of a playoff spot. It's funny, at the time of the firing, they actually were technically, based off of points, in the second wild card position, which kind of surprised me because, the last week they've been terrible and they were losing left, right, and center. And then they lost 5-1 to Columbus, and that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back that cost Monty his job there. But I fully expected when I went to go and look at the standings when I saw the firing to see Boston was going to be closer to the bottom of the East standings. No, they were in a playoff position. So despite still being in a playoff spot, they elected to move on from Jim Montgomery. It's interesting. It's funny you bring up the Edmonton situation from last year with Jay Woodcroft. Like, I wonder how much of that kind of played a factor into that decision for Sweeney here in Boston, where he said to themselves, hey, Edmonton found themselves in a very similar situation last year. And before they let things get too south, they made a change and it was for the better. They ended up rattling off like 17 of the next 19 games or something like that and rode it all the way to a Stanley Cup final. Like, I wonder how much that had to do with this decision as well.
I think you also just needed to get some heat off of you. The Bruins, their sellout streak ended yesterday. The last game they played, that had gone since 2009. First time since 2009 they didn't have a ticketed sellout. They had 300 some odd seats not sold. But I think it was more or less just to stop the bleeding because everybody's kind of mad at each other right now. You saw Montgomery, and I don't put a lot of stock in you shouldn't air things out because more than once in the early phases of the season, you saw him and Marchand yelling at each other on the bench. I think that's a good thing. I think you want your coach letting guys know, hey, this isn't going to cut it. And from the Bruins people I've talked to, from my friends who are Bruins fans too, it kind of felt, and I make this allusion lightly, but kind of feels similar to what's going on in Pittsburgh right now, where everything's kind of going wrong and people want a pound of flesh, even if it's not actually going to solve the issue. But they want something because, they still got to play 66 more games here.
Yep.
And you don't want to drag this out longer. I think that's the biggest reason you do this now. Because if you march through the season and you let him go through and finish the contract, because he was reportedly working on an extension, but the Bruins very quickly put those negotiations to halt based on the slow start, there's no way you could sell that because you still have to sell tickets. And there's enough talent on this team where all it's going to take is one good week and you'll get back in the mix. Because once you get past the six division playoff spots, those wild card spots are going to be there. No one is all of that convincing. I know the Rangers are in that one of those spots right now, and they have 25 points, the same amount as Florida does, who's in first in their division. But there's going to be a spot available there. Ottawa, the Islanders, Washington, Carolina, the Devils. There's enough room there where someone's going to end up out, but the Bruins very easily end up back in one of those spots.
They very well could, and they should, based on, what the Bruins have been over the last little bit. But it does kind of beg the question, Nick, like, is this maybe Father Time just finally catching up to them? Like, I feel like every year there's usually skeptics thinking maybe this is the year the Bruins kind of fall out of it, and it hasn't happened yet. But it looks like this year it has. But the question is it going to continue? Will they get it back on the rails? Or, like I said, is this just Father Time catching up to them?
So I think it's partly Father Time, but not in the traditional sense. It's not like this is an ancient team when you look through their lineup. Other than Marchand, this is a relatively young team. I think the mistakes of the last handful of seasons have really started to accumulate. I think the fact they haven't drafted particularly well, they haven't been able to develop any AHL guys into full-time NHL regulars in the top six. I think the fact they've tried to solve a lot of their problems through free agency over the last handful of years has kind of put them in an uncomfortable position where they have a lot of money tied up in players. I always say that July 1st is like going grocery shopping hungry. You look at Elias Lindholm and yeah, sure, I see what you were trying to do. Same thing with Zadorov. You needed a defenseman. He's probably the best left-handed D available on the first day. Why not? But you're shopping hungry. You're not thinking too deeply. You're thinking, well, we just got to make the playoffs. Anything can happen if we make the playoffs. And that's really how they've run this team for the last handful of seasons. And I know, the best regular season ever in the 82-game regular season 2 years ago. But you lost a lot of talent after that year. You lost a lot of talent after last year. You had to give away Taylor Hall for nothing because you didn't have the cap space to keep him. You made really aggressive moves and you didn't get it. Sweeney deserves credit for being aggressive and trying to get them to a Stanley Cup. They've had 2 appearances since they won the one way back in 2011. But if you don't win, eventually people get fed up with you. I think this is Sweeney trying to take the heat off of himself. I think more than anything, it's just trying to buy some breathing room.
Yeah, Elias Lindholm, just 2 goals through the first 20 games of that contract. Not good enough. Not good enough for a guy who was brought in to be a top 6 point contributor to this team. I mean, you need a lot more than that if you're Elias Lindholm, and they're expecting a lot more of that. But if you are a Bruins fan, you can look to that statistic, 2 goals in 20 games, and think that's got to turn around. You could look at Jeremy Swayman and his god-awful statistics to start the year. I mean, you'd have to assume that he'll be better than a 347 goals against and an 884 save percentage the rest of the way. So there are some things you could look at and say, look, it's just a slow start. Things got to get better. And the fact that they, make this change now before things got real south, there's still a chance for that to happen. Did you happen to see the quote from Charlie McAvoy today? If not, I'm about to play it. I was just curious if you saw it or not, because I thought it was a very interesting quote from Charlie McAvoy. Here, I'll play it now and we can listen.
For a minute. We lost it. We lost it for a minute. And this is life. And these things happen. But today you wake up and you realize that you still have the best job in the world, playing for the best team in the world, the best organization in this game. I'm lucky and I'm blessed to be here. And today was a day of gratification, self-reflection, and then realizing that, we have 62 games left and we're still in a playoff spot or somewhere near it. So we got everything to play for. And that's the crest. That's each other. That's everything. and it's all going to be all right.
Pretty solid quote. I'll say that. Pretty solid quote from Charlie McAvoy, and it really goes to speak to what we've been talking about the Bruins for the last decade, is just the strength of the culture in that room. And it sounds like that this could work as a reset and a springboard into a much better final 80% of the season.
Absolutely agree with you. The Bergeron school of leadership has worked. The Chara school of leadership, because, McAvoy, he's already 6 years in the league at this point, and he was under Chara's wing, under Bergeron's wing. Marchand, same deal. Been with the team since 2010, grew up under those guys too. They really have done a great job with the institutional knowledge that you pass down. That's your goal. You keep guys long-term to build into those and grow into those leadership roles, and they continue passing that down. McAvoy's still a young guy, and he talks like that. That's a good sign for the strength of your organization.
From a fired coach to a possible coach of the year contender in Washington, big news out of the Capitals organization. Ovechkin going to be out week to week. We'll come back and discuss what that means for the team and what that means for the goal chase as he looks at Wayne Gretzky's record, and how much longer will we now have to wait for that to happen. And a weird situation brewing in Toronto. Auston Matthews injured, and we're not quite sure what's going on, but he's not even in the country. We'll talk about all that and more coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. With PrizePicks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. For example, if you opened up the PrizePicks app or went over to their website, you could do whether Clint Capella is going to have more than 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists, if Zach LaVine is going to have more than 22.5 points for the Bulls, or if you're in the hockey mood, if Connor McDavid is going to have more than 1.5 points against the Minnesota Wild tomorrow night. So head on over to the PrizePicks app, use the code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, download the PrizePicks app, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by Gametime. If you guys know me from hosting Locked On NHL on Thursdays with Hunter Hodes, you know I love getting out to events. Getting at least one more in this weekend, heading to AEW Full Gear. Got my tickets from Gametime, the only place I buy tickets. And right now, Gametime is the exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. If you head over to the Gametime app, you can get 10% off bleacher seats and up to 20 to 25% off home plate area seats with the panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what you're walking into when you click that button. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Locked On NHL podcast continues. It's your Wednesday Eastern Conference edition with Mike DiStefano and Nick Zararis filling in for Ross Levitan. Lots of stuff happening in the NHL right now, but I mean, I think nobody could argue that the biggest positive story in the NHL for the first month has been the Alex Ovechkin resurgence. 39 years old, and he somehow has a leading 15 goals through just 18 games. The one problem, Nick, his last outing, injured himself and is now week to week. What a kick in the pills for not only the Capitals, mainly for Ovi, but also for all his hockey fans who are just enjoying this goal chase on a nightly basis.
It's really unfortunate. And I was talking about this with one of my friends over the weekend who's a casual hockey fan. And he's like, how old is Ovechkin now? And I was like, he's basically LeBron, if you're thinking about in terms of age. They came into the sport around the same time, 04, 05. He's like, he's that old? And I'm like, yes, he's that old. And the unfortunate thing is for him, for Sid, You're talking about basically 3 fully lost seasons over their respective careers. You lose the 04-05 season, which would have been Ovechkin's rookie year. You lose half of the 2012-13 season. They only played 48 games. You lose 15-ish in 2019-2020, and you lose 26 in 2020-2021. Between those, Ovechkin has the record by now if those impediments don't come up. And, it's not his fault. It's not like this is an off-injured player who's trying to hold it together just to break the record. Ovechkin's been remarkably consistent. He's only missed more than 12 games in a season 2 times in the 15 some odd years he's been in the league. This is one of the most not elastic. That's not the word. Durable. That's the word. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. The most durable players we've seen. And it's really unfortunate. He came out of the gate on fire. I mean, I've talked about it a million times on Thursdays talking about the Capitals. He had 8 goals at the All-Star break last year, and he finished with 31. All it takes is a little bit of juice, and he can still turn on the lights every now and then.
Yeah, man. And what we've seen to start the year has been nothing shy of incredible. And just really got to within 27 goals shy of the record, and unfortunately he's going to be week to week, so won't get to see him. I don't know how long this injury is going to be. Lower body injury. It was a collision with Jack McBain in the neutral zone. Looked like ankle on ankle. So some sort of ankle injury. My biggest fear, again, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I have no idea if this is actually going to be an issue, but at 39 years old, coming back from an ankle injury, he's not going to be skating for the next couple of weeks for sure as he rehabs this thing. What's he going to look like when he comes back? Right? Like that's my biggest fear. And he's probably not going to, pick up where he left off. It might take a little bit to get going again, to get chugging, to get back into midseason form. And a week ago, I would have said he's finishing the record this year. It's going to happen. Now I'm not as sure. Yeah, if he comes back the next 2-3 weeks, he only needs 27 the rest of the way. He was on pace for 60 goals, 62 goals when he got hurt. So he still will be on pace to do it. But when he gets back, I'm hoping I'm wrong. But, history would suggest that it'll be a much more difficult task now post-injury than it would have been, 3 or 4 days ago when we were talking about it.
So I went and did the paper and pencil math. I broke out a notebook and a pen for the first time in a while. He had 15 goals in 18 games. He was on pace for 68 goals on 23.8% shooting. The math would tell you that based on his career averages, if he finished the season with his career average shooting percentage, he would have finished with 37 goals. Based on that, and based on the fact he's going to miss roughly 10 games, he should still finish within shouting distance of that 27 goal mark. And that's assuming he misses 2 weeks. If he misses 3 weeks, he probably finishes closer to 24-25 as opposed to 28-29. But we're all talking about ranges, so we don't know, and like you said, it'll be curious to see if the Capitals can sustain the strong team start. They're sitting in first in the Metro right now without Ovechkin, because that's been one of the real surprises, is that Washington, after last year where they were kind of in the playoffs by default, they came out of the gate great this year. Dylan Strom's been close to a point per game player. Connor McMichael's had some really nice flashes as well. Sustain that.
Alexi Protas. Don't sleep on my boy Alexi Protas. That man, he's a monster, that kid.
The Capitals have slowly pieced together a nice supporting cast, and I've been joking that it's the Ovi and Friends retirement tour, basically, because once he breaks the record, it's simply a matter of how much longer he wants to play. Right. I think he gets there. I really do think he'll get there this year.
This year? He still gets there this year? Yeah,
I think so.
I'm going to hope he does. I think it'll be a lot closer, obviously, now with the injury situation, but I'll hold some belief there. I'll go glass half full on that one. But you brought up a good point. This team has been incredible. It's legitimately the anti Jim Montgomery Bruins. That this is a team and a coach in Spencer Carberry who right now is got to be up there with Scott Arniel when you're talking about Coach of the Year candidates. If he can navigate this Ovi injury and continue to get this team playing well, winning games, scoring goals, that'll be an absolute feather in the cap at the end of the year when we're talking Coach of the Year. Do you think that happens, though? Do you still have belief that the Capitals can keep it rolling even without Alex Ovechkin?
I think so. I think they have enough talent, and I think I don't know if I made this point clearly enough when we were talking about the Bruins. The bottom half of the East just isn't that good. So you have a lot of margin for error because between between Columbus, the Flyers, Detroit, Buffalo. Montreal. That's 5 of the 16 in your conference right there who are basically non-factors for a playoff spot. So you're really in and you could probably put the Penguins in there as well, barring something weird. I mean, you're in competition with who? The Islanders, the Bruins, Ottawa for that last playoff spot, even if you go really cold. I think you have enough of a point cushion. I mean, what's the Elliot Friedman stat? 80 some odd % of the teams in a playoff spot on American Thanksgiving. We're a week away from that. If the Capitals are in a playoff spot a week from now, they probably end up there at the end of the season too.
Yeah, it's a good point. So we'll see if they can keep it rolling. What's their next game? They play tonight? They got a game tonight? I don't believe so. Tomorrow. They play tomorrow against the Colorado Avalanche. So really tough opponent right out of the gate, sans Alex Ovechkin. But we'll see how that goes. The Maple Leafs play the Golden Knights tonight in a little cross-conference clash. They'll be without their captain, Auston Matthews, who we don't even know what the hell's going on with this injury. So let's come back and we'll kind of talk about it and see if there's reason to be worried about last year's Rocket Richard winner. That's coming up next. You're on the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. If you opened up the FanDuel app, you would see the Steelers and the Browns on Thursday Night Football. The Steelers, 3.5-point favorites, but the best game of the weekend, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens heading to LA to play the Chargers, where the Ravens are 3-point road favorites. So head on over to FanDuel.com, where you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Welcome back into the Locked On NHL podcast, Wednesday Eastern Conference edition with myself, Mike DiStefano, and Nick Zararis filling in for Ross Levitan. And typically, since I'm the host of Locked On Leafs, Ross is the host of Locked On Sens, there's usually a little Battle of Ontario segment of some kind on these shows, and I could only imagine the absolute. He'd be giving me the gears. Let's just put it flat. He would be giving me the gears right now about what's going on with this Auston Matthews injury situation. As someone who covers the team on a day-to-day basis, I'm still very much have no idea what the hell is going on. I couldn't imagine what the rest of the league and, teams in other markets feel is going on with Auston Matthews. Like, what do you know about the situation? Because I know basically squat.
So I know there is an injury. I know that he is in Germany. I know that a lot of professional athletes have gone to Germany to get stem cell treatments to help recover from various things. Christian McCaffrey, who missed the first 9 weeks of the NFL season, he was over there for stem cell treatments for his Achilles. I know Kobe did that for his knees. I know Rey Mysterio did that for his knees. I know A-Rod did that for his knees. I'm assuming this is a joint injury of some kind. I know he had the really bad shoulder injury a couple seasons ago. It could be that. It could be a number of things. But that would be my assumption. I know I saw Tree Living said the Leafs team doctor is over there with him. He's been there before, and that he's getting both a checkup on previous work and more treatment. So deducing all of that would tell you this is a nagging injury of some kind that's probably on a joint, because that's where stem cells are most viable for treatment. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot to glean here. The NHL is not nearly as transparent with their injuries the way the NFL is, where you have to designate what the injury is. So we're going to sit and wait.
Yeah, he's been out since November 3rd and went from a day-to-day situation to all of a sudden he landed on injured reserve. And now here we are 17 days later and he's not even in the country. Now he's out in Germany, like you said. The assumption is there's some stem cell surgery happening or stem cell treatment happening. That has not been corroborated by the team or by anyone else, to be fair. It's just more of jumping to conclusions based on past experience and based on what goes on in Germany. It's kind of like someone goes to Turkey and they don't have a head of hair. You pretty much know what they're going to Turkey for these days. But yeah, it's really, really, I don't know. It's concerning, as someone who covers the Leafs, just based on the fact that they keep saying there's no setbacks, and then there's no surgery, there's no setbacks, but there also hasn't been any improvement either. And all of a sudden, apparently, this treatment is supposed to completely rid this ailment from Auston Matthews. Like I don't know. Like, is stem cell therapy pretty much like a wonder drug that I'm unaware of, that just completely, a potion that gets rid of whatever ailments people have? Like, that's what they're almost making it seem like, if that is indeed what's happening. Because so many times they've said, yeah, we're giving him time to rest, so when he gets back, this is behind him for good. Well, if it's been 17 days and longer than that, that's just when he decided to finally shut it down. Apparently, this stems all the way back to the preseason. Now, all of a sudden, in 1 week, it's going to just be done, and he's now over and done with it. I don't know. It's weird what's coming out of the Maple Leafs with this whole thing.
That's the lack of that is the peril of a lack of transparency. And I understand why, for strategic reasons, you wouldn't want to disclose that. But at the same time, you have a very anxious fan base who would like to know if their best player is healthy or not. And that's really important for the direction of the team. What I would say is this: Rey Mysterio has been a professional wrestler since like the late 1980s, early 90s. He's like 56 years old and still wrestling. And he moves great for a 56-year-old, and he got double stem cell treatment in both his knees after looking kind of washed in the mid-2010s. So yes, stem cells are kind of a magic wonder treatment for joints and aging players. I know Matthews isn't that old, but I know he had the nagging wrist injury a few seasons ago. He had the shoulder injury that I mentioned. He was hurt during the playoffs this past season, missed a couple games in that series against Boston. So ultimately, the extent of the analysis you and I can offer here is who knows, because the Leafs haven't told us.
Exactly. Now, the team is winning in his absence. They're 5-1 in the 6 games that he's been out. Marner's played fantastic. They're getting good goaltending. And defensively, under Craig Berube, it's a team that has played a lot stingier. I think they're second in the NHL when it comes to giving up high danger chances against that 5-on-5. So with all of that, they've been able to weather the storm. But this is, a 3-time Rocket Richard winner. He scored 69 goals last year. They need their captain back at some point, and hopefully when he returns, it's behind him, as they're saying, and he could start ripping home goals again. And, this team can kind of take off in the way that, they're supposed to, I suppose, under Craig Berube, and playing the way that they are. Really quickly, before we kind of take off for the evening, Nick, I did want to give some love and some credit to one player in the NHL who's quietly having an unbelievable season and is on a tear right now. It's Marty Necas of the Carolina Hurricanes. Not getting a whole lot of love out there, but this guy's looking to extend a 14-game point streak tonight, or extend to 14 games tonight. When they take on, who are they playing tonight? Actually, they just played St. Louis, but looking to go 14 straight. He's got 27 points in his last 13 games. Carolina's won 11 of those last games on the back of Marty Necas. Remember this summer when there was reports that he had demanded out, and Carolina said, maybe we'll sign you instead. What a decision that turned out to be for Carolina. This guy's unbelievable.
The talent's always been there. He's big, he's really fast in a straight line, and he's got good puck skills. It was really just a matter of him putting it all together, and been one of the driving forces at Carolina's great start. A lot of people, me included, expected them to take a step back. They lost their entire second D pair. They lost Gensel. You would assume they would have a step back.
Teravainen.
Losing Teravainen too. Forgot about that, in all honesty. You lose that many guys in one offseason, you expect some step back, but Rod's got the regular season formula down. The Hurricanes are very much kind of like the Bruins, where I'll believe in the drop-off when I see it, and Carolina's yet to drop off. The Bruins might be dead, to circle back to our opening topic, but Carolina has shown they can withstand losing talent.
No matter who's in net, too.
That's another great point. Yeah.
All the injuries over the years, and they still, no matter who's in goal, whether it's James Reimer, Peter Mrazek, whether it's Freddie Anderson,
Ranta,
Chekhov, Ranta, doesn't matter. They play the system that allows anyone to flourish in goal, apparently. And It's a good team. It's a good team they got over in Carolina. And Martin Nakash turning into a superstar. Massive breakout to this point this season. So, yeah, it'll be interesting tonight. They take on the Philadelphia Flyers, who, aren't great at stopping pucks. So, good chance Marty Nakash extends it to 14 games in a row tonight. We shall see. Nick, appreciate you stepping in, pinch hitting for Ross again. Congrats to him and his wife on the birth of their child. We'll see if he's back next week or if he's too tired and maybe he'll be busy changing diapers. I don't know, but I appreciate you stepping in this week and helping us out on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NHL pod. But I thought you were going to come back with.
I thought there was more in that sentence. My bad.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I just appreciate you joining the show,
yeah, of
buddy.
Course. Anytime. I am always good to pinch hit. If I'm actually going to make contact with the ball, that's a different question. But I'll always take the at bat.
I think you hit at least a double to the wall. I'll take least that. A double to the wall. Maybe you could stretch it out into a triple, possibly. No, probably thrown out because you left me hanging. Fast. You left me hanging at the end there, so thrown out if you go to 3. So we'll hang it at a double and call her a day. Appreciate everyone for listening to the show. Check in Hunter and Nick on tomorrow's Thursday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. But that does it for us. Appreciate it, guys.